folks. Welcome. The practice of statistical inference involves using information from a sample to say something about a larger population. One common application of statistical inference is testing a claim you might have about a population mean or a proportion. An example of a claim you might have about a population mean is this idea that I've had for years. And that idea is that I think that students study more than an average of 5 hours per day. That's a claim I've made about all students. Unfortunately, I would never have the time to ask every single student how much they study, so instead, I can test that claim about a population using data I collect from a sample. So the idea is I would collect some data, would calculate a sample average, compare that sample average to the 5 hours that I have for my claim, and then ultimately, I'd be able to decide if there's support for the claim or I might have to reject the claim. Here's an example of a claim you might have about a population proportion. I've always thought that more than 60% of college students hum along when they hear a Taylor Swift song on the radio. Again, I would never be able to ask every single student whether or not they sing along to T-Swizzle, so instead I would collect information from a sample. From that sample, I could calculate a proportion. I would compare that proportion to the 60% that I have in my claim, and then I could decide if there's support for the claim or I might have to reject the claim that I have about all college students based on what I learned from the sample. The first step of a hypothesis test is writing out the null and alternative hypotheses. The alternative hypothesis is typically a statement of your claim, whatever that claim might be, and the null hypothesis is typically a statement that your claim is not the case or that it's not true. When writing out your hypotheses, the null hypothesis always has an equal sign. It could simply be an equal sign. It could be a greater than or equal to, or it could be a less than or equal to. With the alternative hypothesis, you have a greater than sign, a less than sign, or not equal to sign. With the alternative hypothesis, you never have an equal sign. So here's an example of how I might set my alternative and null hypothesis for my claim that I think students study more than an average of 5 hours per day. So again, the alternative hypothesis is your claim. So you see an H sub A, and my alternative hypothesis is that mu, so mu represents a population average, is greater than 5. So you could state my alternative hypothesis is, I think that the average for a population is greater than 5. Again, the null hypothesis is that my claim isn't true. So you see the H with a subscript not or subscript 0, that stands for null, and that is mu is less than or equal to 5. In other words, the null hypothesis is that the mean value is less than or equal to 5. Here you see the alternative and null hypotheses for my claim about the population proportion. Again, my claim is that I think that more than 60% of college students hum along to Taylor Swift songs. So that's written out as my alternative hypothesis. So you see the H subscript A, and that is uppercase P, where the uppercase P stands for a population proportion, is greater than 0.60 or greater than 6%. The null hypothesis is that the claim isn't true. So you see my null hypothesis, H subscript 0, is that capital P is less than or equal to 60%. In other words, it's not the case that it's more than 60%, which is my claim. Here's another example of a claim about a population mean, and that is, I think that the average amount that Americans spend on vacations is not equal to $1,000 per year. So if you write that out as the alternative hypothesis, H subscript A is mu is not equal to $1,000, whereas the null hypothesis is H subscript not is mu is equal to $1,000. This is a different type of a hypothesis, where this is an inequality claim. Again, my claim is that I think the average amount that Americans spend on vacations is not equal to $1,000 per year, and the null is that it indeed is equal to $1,000.